Okay, we do have a meat resource in the United States if you would like to get meat in the United States. If you want to get meat and you're in the East, then we have a source there. If you want to get meat in the UK, you can send an email and we have a source there. Now, if you're in the States, there's a sister who have made meat and she can send them out from California. Okay. And if brothers want a mitri, which you see on our heads when we're teaching, of course the crown of our heads are not covered. You can send an email. The email you'll send if you want a mitri is 144kings, 144kings at gmail.com. Okay, that way you can have a mitri. Most people were asking. She's doing $20 for a mitri, and I'm sure if you send an email, she'll let you know what the shipping and handling is. It's very light, don't cost a lot for shippings, but it might be an additional couple of dollars just for the shipping, and it should be there to your home within 5 to 7 days. All right. So if you need that, and we'll be doing a video within the academy to show one how to wrap a mitri also. Sisters, we didn't forget you all when it comes to headscarves and things of that nature. We're going to work on some of those things so that you can order headscarves and head wraps if you want them, okay, with different styles, okay? But in the meantime, right now, the mitris are available for the brothers and sisters who would like to order them, and for the brothers who would like to order them. The email is 144kings at gmail.com. Oh yeah. When it comes about the clothing, that's coming soon also. As far as to get certain garments with fringes, borders, or blues on them, yes, we're going to do those also. All right. Well, usually fringes is, you can go to your sewing shop, go to any sewing shop, and you'll see fringes on a roll, cloth fringes if you want them. I mean, they're quite inexpensive. Some of you can actually buy it and just sew it to the bottom of your garment yourselves. You see the fringes. Take the border of blue and put fringes on it and sew it yourself. Or, you know, one convenient way of doing things if one cannot sew is some real good Velcro. Therefore, if you want to wear a shirt and you don't want the fringe style on it, you can always Velcro it off. And when you go into certain events, you can put the fringes on through Velcro. So those are options for you there. All right. Fringes, you can go to any material store and get fringes on a roll. They sell it by the foot. So again, the email address is 144kings at gmail.com. 144kings, that's KINGS, at gmail.com. All right. All right, let's get into the lesson. Let me see this real quick here. Now, today, we'll be going into a lesson. It's more so history, along with scriptures. And through the lesson, you'll know its importance. The history of the Israelites in Egypt. And we're going to also integrate that with the African deception. The Israelites were in captivity in Egypt for 400 years, which we went through in scripture. All right. And they were being oppressed by a Hamitic or black race. Now, here's the issue. Moses himself, which we're going to go into the lessons, Abraham, the children of Abraham, they were all black people. Moses himself lived amongst the Egyptians and was raised in an Egyptian house. So if he was raised amongst black people, he must have been black. You understand? If they mistaken Moses for Egyptian. All right. So we're going to go into a little history along with bibliography to give you some detailed facts so that you can prove who are the children of Israel in the earth today and get away from the African deception. When I say the African deception, you have people that are teaching in mainstream religion, also through a lot of these colleges, that all black people stem from a Hamitic race. That if you're black, you are from the seed of Ham. Number one, that is a bold-faced lie, first and foremost. In the Western world, where our people have predominantly been taken into captivity or slavery in the Western world, be it anywhere in the world, we went into cargo slave ships. We've been taught since our people came off the shores of Africa that makes us Noah's son Ham. We're going to prove to you that is a lie. Noah's son Ham did not inhabit all of Africa, only northern Africa. The examples I can give you here, you got, let's get Ham out of the Bible dictionary. Let's start there.
Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood.
The youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood.
And one of 8 persons to live through the flood.
One of 8 persons to live through the flood.
He became the progenitor of the dark races.
Progenitor means father. He became the father of dark races.
Not the Negroes.
Not the Negroes. Read.
But the Egyptians.
But the Egyptians, which are African.
Ethiopians.
Ethiopians, which are Africans.
Libyans.
Libyans, which are North Africans.
And Canaanites.
And Canaanites, which was an Hamitic family that lived in the land of Canaan before the children of Israel inhabited Israel. All these 4 families of Ham lived predominantly in North Africa. Okay? And the black people in America cannot trace themselves to none of these 4. So I'm perplexed when I hear Egyptologists claim that we are from Egypt and we should be going into Egyptology and Egyptian worship. Now, some people might ask, and I've never went into this before, but I thought that I would take this opportunity before we go into the lesson to prove this. Some people ask, well, what happened to the Canaanites? I'm going to prove to you what happened to the Canaanites today. We're going to also show you that a large number of the Canaanites was turned leprous and linked in with the seed of Esau. Let's give that example real quick, because we understand that according to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, okay, according to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, that Ham was the father of the dark races, but it says not the Negroes. He specifically said in there, not the Negroes. Now, a lot of information we're going to cover in a short amount of time, so I need you to be keen and attentive. Listen to this clearly. Most people say, well, what difference does it make? We're dealing with the Bible. Who cares? See, they put these disnomers out, or they try to reflect or ignore the information, because by not going into it, by default, we must receive their teachings on who black people are. Now, focus on that for a second. If we don't come with the truth, we're predisposed to the Western world's ideology against us. That's the only information we can go into and accept. So they're telling us it's not about race, but yet they're teaching us in these religious institutions that black people are dealing with the curse of Ham's son, Canaan. Now examine that for a second. Now it's ironic that they claim in the churches that we're Gentile dealing with the curse of Canaan, when we can prove that a lot of the Canaanites were turned leprous white as snow. So the one family that the churches do relate us to, we can show where there was a change. And they cannot prove we are Egyptians. They cannot prove that we are Canaanites. They cannot prove that we are Ethiopians. They cannot prove that we are Libyans. Those slave ships that took us into our captivities, into the Americas, into the West Indies, into Europe. None of those boats came from Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya. None of those ships came from any of those areas. None of those ships came from Canaan, which is today Israel. So the only shred of evidence or shred of information they're using to link us to the cursed seed of Canaan is the fact that we came from Africa. How ridiculous is that? When there's presence of all races in Africa, in different parts of Africa. So then we can turn this around and say, well, why do they want us to believe that we are from Ham or from Canaan? Why? Because you have Europeans who are claiming to be Israelites or Jews. If we can relate ourselves to Shem and not Ham, then all the fingers point back to those who are claiming they are Jews. So who are you? If we are from the seed of Shem and we're the children of Israel, who are you? Now, we're going to concentrate on Egypt. Why will we concentrate on Egypt? Egypt is a place beyond any shadow of a doubt that we can relate two dark people living in the same areas, but are two specific races, one race ruling the other race, and they're both dark. So if we can point that out and say, well, okay, if the Egyptians were black, then these people who was serving them were black. Who are these people today then? Who are the Israelites that were serving in Egyptian captivity? So we want to point to Egypt because that's proven that the color of your skin does not determine race. These are two families living in Africa, living in Egypt together, living in Africa. But one is not from the seed of Ham. One is from the seed of Shem. Dark skin, being raised in Pharaoh's house. Now I want to go here because, yes, the Europeans tried to hijack that too. The Europeans tried to hijack that by showing modern relics that's not too old of the Egypt we see today, going back to the time of the Ptolemies, after Alexander the Greek and his generals took parts of Alexandria in Egypt and set up their Greek and Roman temples, their Greek temples in Egypt, and had white rulers as Ptolemies being worshipped in Egypt. They want you to point to that Egypt around 333 BC. They don't want you to point to ancient Egypt when the Israelites and Moses were there. Okay? So they went into Egypt and did their spin there too. Started setting up their temples during Alexander the Greek's time, and with his generals, the Ptolemies, they set up themselves and their worships in Alexandria. Why do you think Egypt, the city of Alexandria, is called Alexandria? It's named after Alexander the Greek. So they left European relics and European statues from Greece in Egypt and make you believe that, okay, these people must have been the Egyptians. A lie. A bold-faced lie. Then you go all the way up to around 50 BC, during the time of Cleopatra, around that era, during the time of Julius Caesar. Mark Antony. I know you heard the stories. Now, Cleopatra herself, she wasn't all Egyptian. She was also part Greek. So you see how they have you reverence the Europeans who take over lands through conquest. All right. So let's go into this Hyksos history. Now, I know this might not be interesting to some people when it comes to going into history, but it's important. We have an academy here, and it's important that you learn history. There's no possible way you can understand the Bible and not know history. All right. Before I get that, real quick, let's go into, there's a few things I want to go into. Let's go into Numbers. Showing Miriam and Moses. Is that Numbers 10? Numbers 12 and 10, yeah. Let's go there.
Numbers chapter 12, verse 10.
Read.
And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle.
Go ahead.
And behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam and said, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, At last, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned.
So as you can see, and I'm going straight here because I don't want to go into the full story, but in a nutshell, Miriam, or when you translate it Mary, but Miriam, she was speaking against Moses, whom the Most High sent to help deliver the children of Israel. And the Most High struck her with leprosy. And it shows you what leprosy is. In our modern day system in science, they divert you by making you believe that leprosy is a lesion of sores or some type of physical scale or sore on people, like a plague. And that is a lie. Leprosy is when you lose hue of skin, melanin. You lose your hue. She was turned leprous, white as snow. Read.
Verse 12. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed.
Read that again.
Let her not be as one dead.
Let her not be as one dead,
of whom the flesh is half consumed.
In which the flesh, in whom the flesh is half consumed.
When he
half consumed, that's halfway. Read.
when he cometh out of his mother's womb.
When he cometh out of his mother's womb. So what is this being compared to? When he cometh out of his mother's womb. Let me be not as one is dead, who is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb. Who is this speaking of? Let's go to Genesis 25.
Genesis chapter 25, verse 24.
Read.
And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb.
That's Rebecca. There were twins in her womb.
And the first came out red, all over like an hairy garment.
Red all over like a hairy garment. Read.
And they called his name Esau.
And he called his name Esau. So that's the child that came out, half consumed out of his mother's womb. So it was comparing what happened to Miriam. It was comparing the look to the child that came out and was half consumed when he came out of his mother's womb, Esau. So that is a curse that comes in. Some of us might have seen people who their melanin, they're dark skinned, and slowly but surely they get white patches and it goes out throughout their whole body. You understand? And they start going around their lips, around their ears, and then it consumes their whole body. According to the scriptures, that is the curse of leprosy. And when one have this from head to toe, I guess under Michael Jackson, he claimed he had vitiligo or whatever the case is. It's called in scripture a clean leper. See, the scriptures covers everything. Get Leviticus 13 for me, please. Okay. Let's get Leviticus 13. Let's get Leviticus 13. Get Leviticus 13, and let's read Leviticus 22.
Leviticus chapter 13.
Read Leviticus 13 and hold that and get Leviticus 22. Thank you. And start at Leviticus 22 and 1.
Leviticus chapter 22, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, that they shall separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, and that they profane not my holy name in those things which they hallow unto me. I am the Lord. Say unto them, Whosoever he be of all your seed among your generations, that goeth unto the holy things, unto the holy things which the children of Israel hallow unto the Lord, having his uncleanness upon him, that soul shall be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord.
So that means if you were unclean, you could not go into the temple. That means if you have an issue of blood coming out of you, or you have a sore with blood, or a pus, or whatever the case is, you could not go into the temple until the issue had been stopped, until the priest have prayed over you and see that you're fine. Read.
Verse 4. What man soever of the seed of Aaron is a leper, or hath a running issue, he shall not eat of the holy things until he be clean.
Until he be clean. Read.
And whosoever toucheth anything that is unclean by the dead, or a man whose seed goeth out from him, or whosoever toucheth any creeping thing, whereby he may be unclean, or a man of whom he may take uncleanness, whatsoever uncleanness he hath, the soul which hath touched any such shall be unclean until evening.
So you was unclean until the evening. You couldn't go into the temple on the holy days or the Sabbaths until you were clean. Now, a clean leper is someone they have their leprosy, but the leprosy goes over their whole body. There's no spots. That's the only way a leper was allowed to go in. He had to be a clean leper, which means he's white from head to toe. Okay, let's go to Leviticus 13 and let's get some information on this. Now, mind you, we were on our way into the land of Canaan. Read.
Leviticus chapter 13, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or bright spot.
Or a bright spot. Read.
And it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy.
And it be in his skin like the plague of leprosy, the white spot. Read.
Then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priest.
So you wasn't taken to a doctor. At this time, you were taken to a see, back then we understood that everything happened to the body, it's spiritual. Okay, it's not just physical, it's spiritual. So you would take it to the priest, so the priest can examine if there's some type of spirit working here. What's going on here? What's going on with this sickness? Read.
Verse 3. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white.
When it's turned white.
And the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh.
Go ahead.
It is a plague of leprosy.
It is a plague of leprosy. So that's crystal clear. So when they see that it's a white spot and it's going all the way, you can see it, and it's clearly defined, it's nothing where it's going to go away, then they would say, you know what, this person have the plague of leprosy. Read.
And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean.
Go ahead.
Verse 4. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut him up, shut up him that hath the plague 7 days. Verse 5. And the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days more.
Go ahead.
Verse 6. And the priest shall look on him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin.
Okay. So the plague is dark, it spread not into the skin. Read.
The priest shall pronounce him clean.
The priest shall pronounce him clean, because he see that this is not a spreading plague of leprosy. Some people get that. They probably get white spots or whatever the case is. But sooner or later, you eat healthy, you do certain things, and it'll just go away. Read.
It is but a scab.
It's a scab. Read.
And he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin.
So, but if this thing is spreading all over, read.
After that he had been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again.
Like the example I can give you, if you want a physical example, because people are not different now than they were years ago. Some people might see where you may get a sore or a scab, and some of the scab get removed, and it looks white under there. The scab start peeling, and it looks white under your skin. So they wanted to make sure that it was just something healing, where the white blood cells is going there to heal it and turn it normal. Or they wanted to see whether this is something that's going to spread throughout the whole body and turn one white, like some of us have witnessed. I've seen brothers and sisters who've had this particular type of spiritual ailment, which is leprosy. Read.
Verse 8. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy.
Exactly. So that's what leprosy is. That's what clean leopards are. Go to Leviticus 14 real quick. And let's go into 34 to show you that curse was actually in the land of Canaan before the children of Israel got there. Read.
Leviticus chapter 14, verse 33.
Go ahead.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, When ye be come into the land of Canaan,
When you be come into the land of Canaan.
which I give to you for a possession,
Go ahead.
and I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession.
Go ahead.
And he that owneth the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, It seemeth to me there is, as it were, a plague in the house. And then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest, go into it to see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house. And he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house, with hollow strakes, greenish or reddish, which in sight are lower than the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again the 7th day, and shall look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stone in which the plague is, and they shall cast them into an unclean place without the city.
So that's talking about a plague. And when things are growing in your house, like some people like to relate like asbestos and things of that nature to this particular type of thing, where there's growth in your house that makes you sick. According to scripture, this is leprosy of a house. So it's not just with a person. Let's keep on going down. Let's go down because it goes all, I don't want to go into every part of leprosy. Let's go down to Leviticus. Let's go here. Where it talks about the clean leper. One moment here. Let's go to Leviticus. Let's go down. All right. Because it goes into all parts of what we had to do dealing with this particular type of plague. Go to Leviticus 14 and 55. Read.
Leviticus chapter 14, verse 55. And for the leprosy of a garment and of a house.
So there's leprosies of garments, houses. Read.
Verse 56. And for a rising, and for a scab, and for a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy.
And the law of leprosy was in the land of Canaan. That's the point that I wanted to deal with there. There's a lot of other precepts, but what I wanted to show this is because we know that when in Genesis 36, some people ask, well, if it show you in the scriptures that Esau, who were the Romans, linked in with the Canaanites, and we know that Canaanites are dark races according to the Bible dictionary Ham, how is it that the dominant gene didn't take control? And the child, why did the child continue to be leprous or to be white opposed to a dark child? That's why Esau linked in with the Canaanites of leprous hue. They were together, and the Most High had that mark in the earth to signify the Roman Empire, the Roman powers, those who will be controlled in this earth through government or what have you. You understand? Now, are there people of other ethnicities outside of Esau who are that color? Yes. So it's deeper than just the color itself, but we're just bringing that forth. Predominantly, the Europeans fit this bill, but you can't strive in genealogy because there's Israelites who look Caucasian. So you can't strive on this. The reason we are focusing on this, not to down anyone or uphold another, but to uncover or really reveal to you the truth and tear down the lies of Europeans ruling in certain areas, taking identity from other people, taking the identity of the children of Israel. That's why we're pointing these things out, okay? We can't say we Israel and not identify the thievery You understand? Of the nations who have taken our land. This automatically, when we say we Israel, that's pointing the finger to somebody who's claiming they're Israel. Automatically, okay? Now let's go into this. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, but let's go into the lesson itself so that you can see, get some understanding of why we're going back in history and speaking of these things. So we're going to start with Egypt here. All right? Let's start with Egypt. Now the information will inform you of a time period in which so-called scholars refer to as the Hyksos period. Hyksos is spelled Hyksos. Hyksos in the Greek means shepherd kings. And that's, we're going to go over that in a moment. Means shepherd king. So these people who are labeled Hyksos were shepherds which took care of animals and so on and so forth. But yet they were kings too. All right? So let's speak about this for a moment. There have been many hypotheses as to who the so-called Hyksos people were in Egypt. They have been labeled Persians, Asiatic. I hear that a lot. I'm still looking for an Asiatic person. Can someone show me what an Asiatic person is right now? See, this is the mess and the madness that's being taught in our colleges and amongst our people, especially in this Egyptology religion. That, yeah, we're Asiatic. Excuse me, brother. Come on, man. What is an Asiatic person? Right? Now, going further into this, some sources have been stated that no one knows who the Hyksos were. You hear that a lot. Well, some people popped up in Egypt. They ruled and came with much technology and ingenuity, and then they left and disappeared, and no one knows who they are today. Right? That's what they teach in your history. Now, through the Spirit of the Most High, we've been blessed with this history from both the Bible and historians you can reference yourself. And we will plainly identify the Hyksos people, the same people who are shrouded in mystery throughout all antiquity and throughout all your colleges. We will actually bring some levity and understanding to what your colleges ignore. Now, let's begin with our father Abraham. You notice last week we went into the promises of Abraham. Go to Genesis 12.
Genesis chapter 12, verse 10.
Go ahead.
And there was a famine in the land.
There was a famine in the land. Go ahead.
And Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land.
So as we can see, there was a famine in the land in which the Most High told Abraham to go. And he said, listen, go to Egypt. They got food there. Go to Egypt. So what is this showing you? This is showing you someone from Shem, a Shemitic person, not from Ham, going to reside in the land of Egypt. Now, does that make Abram an Egyptian? And see, I'm putting these examples before you because this is the claim they make. If you're from a specific land, it makes you a specific race. No. So that takes away that content, well, or that ideology, oh, well, we were taken from the shores of Africa, so we must be from the seeds of Ham. Here's an example right here of someone that's not Hamitic going into Egypt and sojourning. That means he's living amongst them in Egypt. Now, if someone was looking from the outside and seeing Abraham talking and sojourning amongst the Egyptians, you would think, well, maybe he's one of them. Right? He's living amongst them. He's talking to them. But no, these are two specifically different races in the same landmass, in the same country. That's all that is. There's more. It says Abram went down to Egypt and sojourned there. Now, Abram was about 75 years of age when this happened. He sojourned due to a famine that was in the land of Canaan. Canaan, as you know, we went into this last week, was the land that the Most High promised Abraham and his seed, the land that would one day be called Israel. Right? That was before that was before the sins of the Amorites came to the fullness, or the Nephilim seed, before they did what they had to do to take that landmass and bring forth a new breed of Nephilim within the land of Canaan. This was way before that. Now, it was during Abraham's time in Egypt that the Egyptians received the understanding of science and arithmetic. Now, I'm going to prove this. Before Abram, which was from the seed of Shem, came into Egypt, they had no knowledge of science and arithmetic. So who taught them? Who taught the Egyptians? Now, let's make this clear, because Egyptologists would like to point to Egypt as a cradle, as if it's the cradle of all high-level scientific mathematics and arithmetic and building structures and all those things. But we beg to differ. We know that Ham, Shem, and Japheth all came off of the ark with their father Noah. Right? And Shem was the blessed for all the children. Shem's seed would be blessed. But they would like to focus on the Egyptians based on their technology and ingenuity. Now, this is what I say to these Egyptians who claim all these Egyptologists who claim that they're from Egypt. Even when I ask them, I'm like, okay, so you from Egypt? They'd be like, Hotep. I'm like, okay, Hotep. Okay. So when it's your people from Egypt, give us this history of how you went from Egypt into Africa and eventually got enslaved, because Egypt is North Africa. We were found in Western Africa, predominantly us in the States. So give me that. Can you fill in that blank for me? And you should see how they look at you. They'll start talking about science and all this other stuff. See, they start making up words that's not in the dictionary. This is what they do. But then you come back and say, well, listen to me clearly, brother. I can prove we were in Egypt. And we left Egypt and went into Israel, the land of Canaan. I can prove, according to history and the Bible, because some of them don't want to hear the Bible. No one wants to hear the Bible. I can prove, according to history, with secular information outside of the Bible, that we went from Israel into Africa and fled into the Ivory Coast and different parts of Africa. I can prove that outside the Bible. But we're not Egyptians. We were in Egypt, left Egypt, went into Israel, was slaughtered and destroyed by the Romans, fled into Africa. Then we were taken from the shores of Africa to America. All right? So don't bring information. These Egyptologists like to bring information, but they have more questions than answers. I didn't come to you to leave one level of confusion, which is this world and this science of this world, to go into a whole nother level of a ball of confusion. These Egyptologists are total confusion. But let's talk about Abram for a second. I know some of you don't have your Josephus with you, but we did, as a convenience to you, copy and paste information from the complete works of Josephus, so you have the references yourself. Okay? So I'm on page 2. I'm on page 2 of the information here. One moment. One moment here. That's right. One moment. Okay, I'm on page 2. And the reference we have here to Josephus. Okay. I need you to read the book and the paragraph they can go to for this, please.
This is Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, paragraph 8, Book 1 and 8, paragraph 2, For whereas the Egyptians were formerly addicted to different customs.
The Egyptians were addicted to different customs. Read.
And despised one another's sacred and accustomed rites, and were very angry one with another on that account. Abram conferred with each of them, and confuting the reasoning they made use of every one of their own practices, demonstrated that such reasonings were vain and void of truth. Whereupon he was admired by them in those conferences as a very wise man, and one of great sagacity. When he discoursed on any subject he undertook.
Go ahead.
And this not only in understanding it, but in persuading other men also to assent to him. He communicated to them arithmetic.
He taught the Egyptians arithmetic.
And delivered to them the science of astronomy.
The science of astronomy was taught to him, taught to the Egyptians. Go ahead.
For before Abram came into Egypt, they were unacquainted with those parts of learning.
Before Abram went into Egypt, they were unacquainted, with those parts of learning. They had no idea how to deal with mathematics. Read.
For that science came from the Chaldeans into Egypt, and from thence to the Greeks also.
And this is the technology and ingenuity that the Greeks eventually used. So the technology of arithmetic and all that science can be attributed to our father Abram, not Egyptians. Now, as you can clearly see, that understanding that the Egyptians are revered for, and everyone hold up the Egyptians as the civilization of all technology, or the beginning of all technology, which is utterly ridiculous. Okay? Now, let's go to Genesis 14 and 13.
Genesis chapter 14, verse 13.
Read.
And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew.
Abram the what?
Abram the Hebrew.
Because some people would like to claim that since Abram was of the Chaldees in certain areas, that he wasn't a Hebrew. Now that we figured out that Abraham had much wisdom and science and understanding of arithmetic, and it cannot be disputed, then they still try to take Abram's attributes and relate it to other nations and other people. But when you go into the Bible and say, listen, this belonged to Abram the Hebrew. Now, what's the significance of this? If we give Abraham the credit for all that he had, then we must reverence who? Abraham's God. We must respect Abraham's God. That's the real hitting point and in fact of all this. If we acknowledge that the Egyptians were great and they did all these things, then in turn, we are acknowledging the Egyptian gods and have respect of the Egyptian gods. This is the real argument. This is where this problem lies. The real issue is that if we reverence these people, then we must now look at, okay, what are their practices? How did they become so great in this level of understanding? And then we'll start giving respect to their worships and beliefs, their culture. You notice these Egyptologists out there. You ever go to any of their houses? They got the god Anubis with a jackal's head. I mean, I've been to Egyptologists' houses and some places they hang out. And they got gods everywhere. Different gods with different heads. A man sitting there with a sword, with a jackal, a head of a dog. All that. So now, we're saying that all that ingenuity and technology came from Abram, our forefather. According to history also, we go into the book of the Josephus. Let's go to Psalms 83. And I'm saying this because why would modern so-called scholars and Egyptologists fail to mention this fact? Why would they fail to mention that great ingenuity and technology came from our forefather Abraham? Why they would uphold Greeks, uphold Egyptians, uphold all other nations, but not give credit to Abraham? Now, mind you, the same people who are the same factions of Zionists who have paid and built these constructs you call schools, they're claiming they're from Abraham. They're claiming they're from Israel. They're claiming that they're the Jews. So why is it that they reverence Egypt constructs and Egypt gods and reverence other science like Greek science, but never give credit to Abraham? Think about that. Think about it for a moment. These are the people who they're supposed to be the children of Abraham. So why aren't they defending Abraham then? Why in their schools they're teaching you about Greek philosophers, Plato, Socrates? We're going to answer that too. But let's first answer it with a scripture. Psalms 83 and 1.
Psalms chapter 83 verse 1. Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God.
Go ahead.
For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head.
It says thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up thy head. So that means there's people who hate the children of Israel who are now in a position to exercise that hatred. Read.
Verse 2. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. Verse 3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people.
They have taken crafty counsel against God's people.
And consulted against thy hidden ones.
And they have consulted against thy hidden ones. Why are we hidden? The nations won't tell us who we are. So they have consulted against the Most High's hidden ones. Read.
Verse 4. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation.
This is the greatest conspiracy since the creation of mankind. All these nations have come together and said, what? Let us cut them off from what?
From being a nation.
We cannot allow these people to have any national origin or respect of their own. We have to take the national aspect of them being a people from them. Let's cut them off from being a people. Read.
that the name of Israel,
That's showing you that the nations know who we are. That the name of Israel, read,
may be no more in remembrance.
may be no more in remembrance. Please, we're going to do whatever we can to stop them from remembering their homeland. We cannot bring this to their remembrance. They can start snooping around and understand the Israel. They're going to link into that God again. That God in whom we cannot touch. So all nations at one point had to agree to this. Your League of Nations, your United Nations. You think they just became united? Your League of Nations are in agreement. We're reading it right here. Read.
For they consulted together with one consent.
They are all together.
They are confederate against thee.
And they are a confederate against us. Yes, they are a confederate, but their confederacy is against us. What we're reading the world government political body and their true ideas, what they think, what they feel, and what is their true agenda against our people. In order for this genocide and destruction to work, they must first cut us off from our life source. They must take away our identity, take away our God, take away our nation, and through their education, through their religious system and their education system, continually perpetuate that we're someone else besides what the Bible says we are, besides who the Bible says we are. They have to perpetuate the lies. Your history is a bunch of lies. Bunch of lies, brothers and sisters. Before they set up and make any textbook or any education or bring forth any religious forum, they look at the blueprint and say, okay, we have to make sure we let people know that if it's a religion, it doesn't matter who you are. Now that affects us more than anyone because everyone else have a national origin. So that it doesn't matter who you are, don't affect them like it affects us. You understand? Because they already have a source to draw from. They have a national origin. That only affects us negatively because we're the people who have nothing. So they must make sure that that's part of the ideology or the blueprint of any literature or anything that they're bringing forth. They have to keep that out there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And in your schools, they must push national patriotism. So you can so to feed that spirit of belonging and national belonging and national patriotism. Because everyone need that. You need to feel like you belong on a team. They'll have you use that spirit towards the country you live in, the country who's oppressing you, opposed to the origin or country you are from. So they'll cut us off from being a nation, but they want you to be patriotic when it comes to the nation you're living in. See that? They say, let us cut them off from being a nation. Read.
Let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.
That the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. We need to make sure these people never figure out that they are the actual children of Israel. They can never find this out. That's part of, this is what they're dealing with in the UN, all that. Okay? We've brought forth education. They've financed our demise and their education. Look how much money they pour into these institutions. Even they'll give us scholarships and everything just to stay asleep. Just to buy into the system to teach others not to link into their life source. Read.
Verse 5. For they have consulted together with one consent.
They're all a confederacy against our people. Go ahead.
Verse 6. The tabernacles of Edom.
Now it's showing you who's at the height of this, the Romans, who are the Jewish Zionists today. Read.
And the Ishmaelites.
The Ishmaelites, which are the Arabs, which are what you would call in Saudi Arabia, those that are in league, like those rebels that are running around the Middle East right now, going from country to country, helping the Western world topple these other Middle Eastern countries. That's Ishmael. So Edom and Ishmael are together with this. Why? Because of the promise that was given to Isaac. Ishmael got upset. And the promise that was given to Jacob. Esau got upset. So they came together and say, well, listen, since he took our birthright and since he took our covenant, we will make a covenant together and take them out. And we'll share the spoils. That's what's going on. When you go into your neighborhood, same neighborhoods we had at one point during the 50s, 60s, it was the Jewish people running all the property and all that and had all the stores. Now, you got Arabs who came in and had all the stores and all the property. This is what they do. They take turns on us. They can only do this if you have no idea who you are. If you are divided. If you have no national origin and no turf to spiritually defend. If you believe the turf belongs to everybody. Now, even on the outside of this, I just want to plug this in there. I want to see somebody from, let's see, we got some people in here. I want to see somebody from the Bronx, New York. Take a trip to China. And go in the ghettos of China and set up a barbecue shop. I need to see that. And I know you're thinking like, well, that can't happen. Well, why can it happen to you then? How is it that the things other nations can do to us, you can't go and do it where they live? I'll tell you what. Don't even go to China. Go into your areas. If you're in Philadelphia or New York, you have Chinatown. Why don't you go into Chinatown and set up a barbecue home food shop? I'm just giving you an example. See, you have to realize all nations, and I'm throwing them in there because they're in there too. All nations are confederate against you. You are the prey. And if they can take away your nation, your origin, and you have no turf to defend because you believe it belongs to everybody, even though you're living there. If they can take away your God, your national origin, they can do anything they want to do to you. Your open game. And that's what David is speaking of, right? For us to take these people down, they was in a meeting, say, listen, we cannot take these people down as long as they are calling on their God. Okay, well, let's set up schools, let's set up churches, let's set up institutions, and let's cut them off from being a nation. We have to take Israel from these people. They can never know they were from Israel. And then we have to take the name of their God from them. Totally separate them. And we have to set up their own people. We have to set up the educated of their people to teach them that it's right to live in darkness. And that seeking light is evil. That seeking truth is wrong. Man, the plan worked pretty nice, right? But a few of us slipped through the cracks. All right. Finish reading.
The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites.
And Ishmael.
Of Moab.
Of Moab.
And the Hagarenes.
So you're talking about the people who are around the borders of Israel. Okay. And that's why they're actually dealing with what they're dealing with now. Because they were in league with Ishmael They were in league with Edom, but now they're being double crossed. Now they must pay the piper now. Read.
Verse 7. Gabal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher is also joined, or Asher also is joined with them.
Now, when it talks about the inhabitants of Tyre, that's on a whole nother level, and that's a lesson we're going to be going into soon. That's talking about how Dan, the tribe of Dan, linked in with them in league against us. The kings of Tyre, Ithbaal, even Jezebel's father was Dan, going against the prophets and looking to destroy us. The coast of Tyre, the king of Tyrus, all of them are from the tribe of Dan, and that's going to be a lesson coming soon. Read.
Asher also is joined with them.
Go ahead.
They have hope in the children of Lot, Selah. Verse 12. Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God and possessions.
So by cutting us off from being a nation, they were able to take Israel into possession. They could not have enslaved us if it wasn't for them taking our God and separating us from our God. So now that we have no idea who we are, we can be used as a possession now. Read.
Verse 13. O my power, make them like a will, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountain on fire.
Now I want to say this. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. All of these nations have come together to wipe the name of Israel out of the canons of history. The most valuable record that have actually been a godsend to us is the Bible itself. Without the Holy Scriptures, which we call the Book of the Covenant, we would not be able to identify the culprits behind this mass conspiracy. The tabernacles of Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Hagarenes. Now the Bible is identifying the nations that are a part of this conspiracy. Predominantly at the pinnacle or at the top of this so-called pyramid is your Middle Eastern Arabs from Ishmael, which is from the 12 princes of Ishmael, which is Saudi Arabia, and Edom. No way possible, brothers and sisters, would the Western world be able to infiltrate the Middle East without help, without complicity within the Middle East. They got their brother there, Ishmael, to help them. That so-called 911 hijacking garbage that they had in September 11th, 2001. The majority of people that they claimed was on the plane, even though they were remote planes, were Saudis. The guys that was actually practicing on military bases in America before it happened were Saudis. They weren't Iraqis. So they're using Saudis because Saudis are Middle Eastern. So they can use the face of the Middle Easterns because they know that our people are ignorant. To us, all people are the same race over in the Middle East. They can sell you that if you live in another country. So they have these guys doing all levels of false flags, blaming it on the enemies who are against the Western world's rule. That's Ishmael. That's your Muslim Brotherhood that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama is putting in place. Those are your rebels who go from place to place and just switch the flags and claim they're from that particular country and going to topple Libya, Tunisia, different parts of Egypt, going into Libya, now in Syria. These people are not from Syria. They're not rebels going against government. They're Saudis. They're Ishmaelites being used by the Western world. Read. Let's go back into this now. We're going into the Josephus now, more going back to Egypt. here. Now, let's go to Josephus against Apion. And it's some writers have omitted the mention of nation, not because they knew not us, but because they envied us. Now, this is in Josephus against Apion, chapter 1:23. Josephus said with himself, now, some writers have omitted. Omitted means to take out. Josephus was an Israelite. Now that some writers have omitted to mention our nation, not because they knew nothing of us, but because they envied us. History is tainted, and Josephus made this point. He says, listen, ignoring someone in a certain part of history is like ignoring history itself. How can you just look at something that happened in history and just write us out? That's what they did, fulfilling that promise in Psalms 83. I need you to read, Elder Lawyer, Josephus against Apion, 1:25, 1:24 there.
One particular there is still remaining behind of what I first proposed to speak to, and that is to demonstrate that those calumnies and reproaches which some have thrown upon our nation are lies.
So Josephus called all these other nations' historians liars. Don't expect these historians to tell the truth about you, brothers and sisters. You think the Greeks and the Romans was going to tell you the truth concerning your history? You think the Ishmaelites or the Arabs would tell you the truth concerning your history? They need you to be ignorant. It's you that uphold their gods. And we defend their gods more than they do. Examine that. Let me tell you, nobody can be a Muslim like a brother. They go all the way into it. They go get themselves a prayer rug. I mean, they be all out in the street. They'll just break out on the subway and just be doing their thing. No one do it like them. And I was perplexed with the difference, because I was being taught that Islam is the most cleanest religion, and before we pray, I gotta wash my face, I gotta wash my feet, I gotta press my clothes and pull up and everything gotta be clean on me, because being a Muslim is about cleanliness. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, if the Muslims in the Middle East are cleaning their hands and feet, that's all they're cleaning. Okay? I'm not talking about all of them, but the vast majority of them are not doing none of what these brothers I see in the United States doing. None of that. It is more, I believe that if more black people or people that I grew up around who claim to be Muslim went to the Middle East, they would renounce Islam altogether. Because when you go and see it, it's more of a satanic ritual than anything. It's abnormal. But let me not go into my rant on Islam real quick. Let's stick here. It says here, one particular there is still remaining behind of what I first proposed to speak to, and that is to demonstrate that those calamities and reproaches which some have thrown upon our nation are lies. Go ahead.
And to make use of those writers' own testimonies against themselves.
So Josephus says, I'm going to show you that their own testimony, what they said with their own mouth, I'm going to prove based on their own writings that they've lied on our nation. Read.
And that in general, this self-contradiction have happened to many other authors by reason of their ill will to some people.
Go ahead.
I conclude is not unknown to such as have read histories with sufficient care. For some of them have endeavored to disgrace the nobility of certain nations.
It says some of them have set up their religion or set up their historians, not the right history, but to disgrace those who they are against. That's what that is the real reason for them hiring historians. Not to write correct history, but to write down someone else's history and to uphold theirs. Read.
And of some of the most glorious cities, and have cast reproaches upon certain forms of government. And this ill treatment they use chiefly when they have a contest with men of the greatest reputation, some out of envy and malice.
Some out of envy and malice. Go ahead.
Worth of being remembered themselves, and indeed they do by no means fail of their hopes, which regard to the foolish part of mankind, but men of sober judgment still condemn them of great malignity.
They condemn them of great malignity. So the whole deal is these historians are writing with a biased pen. Like, for instance, if a person have disdain against another race or nation, just say a historian has a problem, hypothetically, I'm going to throw some hypotheticals. You have a Japanese historian writing about the Chinese, and he have a problem with the Chinese. You think he'll speak in righteousness or in light of the Chinese, this Japanese writer? Or do you think he'll have bias against the Chinese person when he write particular histories concerning Japanese and Chinese? Like, for instance, if a Japanese writer is writing history of his people, will he uphold his people over the Chinese people in his writings of history? Even if the Chinese people are greater? No, he won't. Why? Because these historians write of their great men, of their history, and write down against their enemies. And Josephus said, this is what the nations are doing to us. They don't like us. They can't stand us. They've been fighting against us for years. And we're looking for them to give us true history. Okay, let's go ahead. Now, what I'm going to attempt to do, because of course this is 25 pages, I can't get through this all. I'm going to show you beyond any shadow of a doubt how we got into Egypt, how long we were in Egypt, and when you run into the history of Hyksos, you can relate that to our people who lived in Egypt. Let's go into the Bible. Let's go to Genesis 15 and 30, which we read last week. Go ahead.
Genesis chapter 15, verse 13. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs.
Thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs.
And shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years.
And that they will be afflicted 400 years. This comes on the ends of where we were last week, speaking of the promises of Abraham. All right. Now, you know about the 400 years. It's speaking about our people in Egypt. All the precepts are there. We went into those precepts last week. So there's no need to go into all those. When you go into Exodus 12 and 41, it talks about us being there for 430 years. Why? Because it came a time in which Joseph was in Egypt before his brothers came. Right? Shalom, Brother Mark. Huh? Yes. Huh? Do you need it? Okay, yeah. I'll get it, okay? The water. That's Brother Mark. He said shalom to everyone. Okay. Going back into the lesson here. Joseph was the dreamer of dreams, where the Most High used to show him the future of his of his rulership, his eventual rulership in Egypt. His brothers had envy against him, and they threw him for dead. They threw him into a pit. They didn't want him to die, so eventually they sold him for money to the Egyptians. While he was in Egypt, he became great. The Most High shined upon him and protected him and used him to save Egypt from a famine of 7 years, excuse me. So Pharaoh told the king, you must store up food for 7 years. Now he started off a slave. And because of his ingenuity, his knowledge, his understanding, and his spirituality, the Most High raised him in due time. You understand? So there was 7 years of plenteous, 7 years of famine. During that 7 years of plenteous, Joseph directed the Pharaoh or the king to store goods for years while the plenteous was there. So that when the famine comes, all people would be subject to the king of Egypt. If they can control the rations of food, they can become the superpower of the earth. So that's what happened there. All right. Now let's go into it. Let's go to Genesis 42. Let's go to Genesis 41, excuse me. Genesis 41 and 45.
Genesis chapter 41, verse 40. Matter of fact, I start a few verses up.
Go ahead.
Verse 39.
Go ahead. Yeah. Excuse me here. Yeah, 41. Yeah, start at 39. That's great.
It says, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as the Most High have showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art.
So now here's another account. You had Abraham go down into Egypt and become great and show them great things. And our brother Joseph, which is the father of the so-called Puerto Ricans and Cubans, did the same. Read.
Verse 40.
Excuse me. Exactly. Joseph is the father of Manasseh and Ephraim. That is correct. Go ahead.
Verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou.
Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So he says, listen, I'm about to set you up as king over Egypt. Listen to this again. Read that again.
Verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house.
Thou shalt be over my house. That means all my servants, my military, everyone is subject to you, Joseph. Go ahead.
And according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou.
Only than thou. So he's setting Joseph up over all of Egypt as a ruler in Egypt. Okay. Now in the history books, this is Imhotep. Imhotep is a stranger who came into Egypt according to their history. He was not Egyptian through blood, brought all sorts of ingenuity and technology into Egypt during the Hyksos period. Now, of course, the Egyptians will reverence him. Egyptologists reverence him. They know that he's not from the seed of an Egyptian, but they will not acknowledge that he's a child of Israel. And we're going to show you why. Finish reading.
Verse 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. Verse 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck.
So he dressed Joseph like an Egyptian. Now we know Joseph is not Ham. But now this Joseph is being recognized in Egypt as a ruler. Read.
Verse 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt.
And they made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. So the Egyptians, just come in here more. The Egyptians had to bow to Joseph. Now, of course, they didn't feel comfortable with this. I'm going to show you that. But you had a respectful ruler in Egypt at that time who respected the fact that if it wasn't for Joseph, they would not have lived through the famine. Go ahead.
Verse 44. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paaneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt.
Now let's examine this for a second. In the Hebrew tongue, Zaphnath-Paaneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Now you have to really look into this to understand how deep this is. The priests of On were the high sorceress over Egypt during that time. And now Joseph becomes the head guy besides the king, and Joseph becomes the chief advisor for the king. So he's over the priests, he's over everyone now. Now the God of the Hebrews' power is resonating throughout Egypt. The king is reverencing Joseph as the key figure now. And Joseph is acknowledging his God. Nowhere in scripture or in antiquity do you find that Joseph ever worshiped the kings of Egypt. Or the gods of Egypt. Now, on the other hand, the chief sorcerer On, daughter, was given to was given to Joseph for wife. So what is this showing? You know that the priest had a problem with this because his daughter would now serve the God of Israel, the eventual God of Israel, the God of Abraham at this time. We're going to go into that in a moment. And it says, read on.
Verse 46.
It says, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, and Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Read.
Verse 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls.
So at that point, we are seeing a transformation. This is our people gaining rulership within Egypt. Okay? Now, of course, if you were to look at pictures now of that time period we're reading of, you would see people dressed like Egyptians. So this is what the Egyptologists say. Well, there's no proof that these were Hebrews. Look at how they're dressed. Excuse me, brother. In the scriptures, it's showing the king dressing up Joseph like an Egyptian. So this is their argument. There is no proof. How can we have proof of all of the Hebrews' customs when a lot of their customs were not developed until they left Egypt? That's where they got the laws, statutes, and commandments, and the ribbons and borders of blues, and the fringes, and culture, and all those things for ourselves. We got that once we left Egypt. So how can you have proof of Hebrew culture visual proof like you want to see it when we became a nation in Egypt. We didn't become a nation in Israel. We went into Israel. So these people during this period of time were looking like Egyptians, acting like Egyptians, but they wasn't following those Egyptian gods. But they were living amongst Egyptians. And this is what I try to explain to these Afrocentric people, these Egyptologists, and they're hard-headed. You try to explain it to them. It's like, listen, just calm down and listen for a moment. Well, I don't want to receive the Bible. See, that's the problem. The Bible is a white man's book. Well, that's the problem. They've placed those, I would call, snares before you. They've placed those snares before you so that you can't come and find the truth of yourself. It's showing you that this man was dressed like an Egyptian, right? Joseph. Now there's more. We're going to do a little jump in here. I hope you can stay with us. And I will open this for questions once we're done, but I can't read everything verbatim. Okay, we have a lot of pages here. All right? Now, let's go down to Exodus. Let's go to the point where his brothers came into Egypt to get food.
Genesis chapter 42, verse 6. Excuse me, verse...
No, let's go to the... I want to go to the last point, and when they went down for the last time. Let's go straight to Genesis 42. And let's start at, what, 8? 42 and 8. Let's go there.
Genesis chapter 42, verse 8. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not.
Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. So time went by from the time that his brothers threw him into the pit and eventually sold him to the Egyptians. So when the brothers came to Egypt to get food, Jacob sent them to get some food. They had to give an account to the ruler, their brother. But Joseph recognized them. They didn't recognize Joseph. Why? Because Joseph was dressed up as an Egyptian. And time went by. He was a little older. He was nice, clean. He had the gold on. He had those things that you hold right here. He had the thing over his head. He had the things over his eyes. So when they seen him, they didn't recognize their brother. He looked like an Egyptian. More proof that the Hebrews were dark like Egyptians. Right? Read.
Verse 9. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them.
Because how could he pass? Listen, how could he pass for an Egyptian if he was looking European? That's common sense. If the 12 tribes of Israel are European and Joseph is European, right? When the brothers go to see him, this new guy in Egypt, wouldn't they recognize that's his brother Joseph? They would see, oh, hi, yeah, that's my brother. He looked different. He's different from them. But no, the Egyptians were dark, so was the Hebrews. And when they seen Joseph, they didn't recognize him. He seemed like a regular Egyptian to him. Right? Read.
Verse 8.
To them.
Verse 9. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. Verse 10. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and he is not. And one is not. Verse 14. And Joseph said unto them, That is it, that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother. And ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely ye are spies. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do and live, for I fear the Most High. Verse 19. And if ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses.
So he told him, go ahead, take corn back to the family. So he was looking out for his brethren, even though he didn't reveal himself at that time. I need you to go to Genesis, the 44th chapter. Let's get straight to the story so that we can show what happened. How did we eventually get into Egypt? Let's go to chapters 44, and let's go to when the brethren came the second time, the last journey, when he revealed himself to his brethren. One moment here.
Chapter 45.
Oh yeah, let's go to chapter 45. Let's go there.
Genesis chapter 45, verse 1.
Go
then
ahead.
Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him.
So one day his brothers came up, and it was killing him that he couldn't reveal himself to his brethren. Read.
And he cried.
And he started crying.
Caused every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren.
So he told all his servants that were given him by the king to leave the room. He told everyone, leave the room and leave me in here by myself with them. Read.
Verse 2. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. Verse 3. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doeth my father yet live?
So he says, listen, I'm your brother. I'm the one you gave away for dead. He revealed himself. And he wanted to know, is our dad still alive? Is he still living? Read.
And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Verse 4. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves. He sold me hither.
He said, don't get mad from what you did, for what you did to me. Don't get upset. Don't get scared. Read.
For the Most High did send me before you to preserve life.
He sent me to do this so that I can help you all. And this is an example for us all. Just because you're brought low into a situation or it seemed bad for you, that doesn't mean that the Most High is not using that situation for something greater later. Okay, of course Joseph was upset. His brothers beat him up and threw him in a pit. His own brothers. Then sold him for dead to the Egyptians. But he didn't show spite towards him, towards his brother, because he realized when it was all said and done, why the Most High did that. He put him in that predicament to one day save his people. He didn't take it personal and say, okay, I remember what y'all did to me. It's payback now. I'm in position now. I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to make you work. I'm going to do all this. No. He forgave his brothers, knowing that it was the power of the Most High. And if it wasn't for his brothers doing that to him, the position he held at this point would not have been. So he understood that. That whole thing was the Most High. So sometimes the Most High, a lot of times, it looks like it's a bad situation. It looks like like something is against you, but you're being directed. Now you're making choices you would not have made otherwise if this bad thing didn't happen. Okay, I just wanted to use that example. But go ahead.
Verse 6. For these 2 years have the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. Verse 7. And the Most High sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth.
He says, so the Most High have sent me before you so that we can set up posterity upon the earth. I'm here to help you. Read.
And to save your lives by a great deliverance.
And I'm here to help deliver you, my brothers. See that? Read.
Verse 8. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but the Most High.
It wasn't you, but it was the Most High.
And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt.
I'm the ruler of Egypt. Go ahead.
Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, the Most High hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. Verse 10. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty.
So they was in the 2nd year of the famine. He says, listen, go get our family and tell everyone to come down here, because you're not going to make it for the next 5 years. So he set up a place so that his family can have refuge. And that place is one of the most fertile lands, even in Egypt till this day, Goshen. Goshen right now is the farm areas for Egypt till this day. Read.
Verse 12. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither.
Now I need you to go here. Go to Genesis 46 and 26.
Genesis chapter 46, verse 26.
And I need you to hold that and get Exodus 1 and 5.
All the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 66.
66. And when you break that down, it's a score is 20. 3 times 20 is 60. So you had 66 souls. But when you round that off, because it talks about the women and all that, you're talking about 70 souls altogether when you round it off that went into Egypt. Read.
Exodus chapter 1, verse 5. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already.
And it says 70 souls came down into Egypt because Joseph was in Egypt already. How did he get in Egypt? His brothers sold him into Egypt. During this time, he became ruler of Egypt. Now, I keep repeating this because when you brothers and sisters run into these Egyptologists, you can let them know you can stake claim to Egypt and know that you are a child of Israel. You don't have to give up your origin and your God and your belief for the sake of Egyptians. We saved Egypt. And when we left Egypt, the Most High cursed the land. We brought arithmetic to Egypt. We brought science to Egypt. We brought ingenuity to Egypt. We saved their land from a flood. And during that time, brought new technology to Egypt. And what did they give us in return? They made us serve with rigor. It happens like that all the time. Look at what happened to us in America. What would America be if the children of Israel was never taken to America? Can you imagine that? America would be Russia. Okay? Come on, man. All the inventions and all the things the Most High had us create in America. And what do we get in return? Same thing. The Egyptians did not appreciate what we did for their government and for their civilization. And above all, outside of us, they didn't acknowledge our God who helped save them. The gods of the Egyptians could not save them through that famine. A matter of fact, some of Pharaoh's wise men died. When Pharaoh was telling them the dream and they couldn't break it down, they didn't know what was going on. He ended up killing his wise men who couldn't explain what these dreams were about. But the God of the Hebrews used Joseph to break down that there will be a 7-year famine. And in order for you to stand through this famine, I'm going to send twice as much of grain and twice as much of everything for a 7-year period. And you better store for that 7 years or you will not live through this famine. Our God, Ahiah, gave that to Joseph. He saved Egypt. But did the Egyptians turn from their God and worship the God of Joseph? No. So it all goes back to giving all praises to Ahiah in the name of Yeshua. Let's go back here. Let's go to Genesis 46 and 28. Read that.
Genesis chapter 46, verse 28. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen.
Go ahead.
And presented himself unto him, and fell on his neck, and wept, and his neck a good while. Verse 30. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren, and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me, and the men are shepherds.
And the men are what?
And the men are shepherds.
And the men are shepherds. Hyksos means shepherd kings. So that's why our name is Hyksos in Greek and African history. They came together and say, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. They could not hide the fact that we were there, but they omitted our name out of history and injected the word Hyksos to hide the fact that it's us. They were shepherds. When did we become kings? When the other brothers of Joseph came down into Egypt and was given position in the land of Egypt. Who do you think Joseph can trust? These Egyptians who was looking to take him down at every turn, or set up his own brother and his brothers in his personal cabinet in Upper Egypt? His brothers became his counselors. Yes. I got more. Read.
And the men are shepherds, for their trade have been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds, and all that they have.
Go ahead.
And it shall come to pass when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation?
What is your occupation? Go ahead.
That ye shall say, Thy servant's trade have been about cattle from our youth, even until now, both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen.
That you may dwell in the land of Goshen. Why?
For every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians.
Every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. They couldn't stand shepherds, people who took care of animals. In the Egyptian land, that was an abomination. Now, the Egyptians had disdain against us, even on the cultural level. All right. Now, we were called shepherds and kings. Therefore, being in Egypt, after Joseph passed, after the king who set up Joseph passed, something happened. Let's go to Exodus, the first chapter.
Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. Verse 7.
Go ahead.
And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them.
And the land was filled with the children of Israel. Read.
Verse 8. Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph.
There arose a new king over Egypt who didn't have respect for Joseph saving the Egyptians through the 7-year famine. Go ahead.
Verse 9. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them.
He says they're becoming more and mightier. They're having children. So let us counsel together and deal wisely with them. Go ahead.
Lest they multiply.
Unless they have children.
And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies.
Because if we don't stop them, they can multiply and one day go against us internally. They can link in with our enemies and take us over. Now, why did the king that was set up at this time have that mentality? Why? Because when you look at the history, and it's even the Josephus also, during the time in which we ruled Egypt under Joseph, we would win every war. We were their strategist. We were dealing with the war strategies and all that for Egypt. So we became the generals and the high minds when it came to war. So this new king that came up said, well, listen, we got to do something about these guys. Because if they have children and if they start out multiplying our nation here, because only 70 souls came in at first. But if they grow as a nation, they will take our country. Right? Sounds familiar, eugenics? Let's look at the statistics and look at the census and see how many children they're having. To see if our eugenics, and weigh that with the eugenics statistics to see if we're on schedule with eradicating these people. Same thing. Read.
Verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with burdens.
So they put taskmasters over our people. Now, ironically, they were using a finance system in which they would hire our people to eventually become bosses over us. Now, when you look in the book of Jasher, it speaks of this. You just can't put a people in captivity. So what they did was they set up a project to build a city, to build a construct and say, listen, we got this new project and we're going to pay you Israelites all this gold and all the, some riches to come down and help us build this city. Now, of course, that was our home. We had no other place to go. We say, yeah, you're going to pay us. We'll help build it. Then they get us in the location and started pulling back wages to the point where there was no more wages. The only people who weren't going for it was Levi. Levi didn't go there. Okay? So this began us serving with rigor. Read. And see, government does this all the time. They know that they can't just say, listen, we here to kill you. So they'll come up with some level of a project or something, or some healthcare scheme or something to have us buy into our own death. This is what the Egyptians did. Okay? Read on.
Verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens.
And you know how it is when you give someone a position. Oh, you the man. As soon as you get a badge or another uniform, you're a different person. Read.
And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses.
They built Pithom and Ramesses. Now this makes people believe out there that Ramesses was the king during that time. No. He wasn't the king during that time. But these cities were being built in reverence to Pithom and Ramesses, kings that ruled in different eras, in past eras. Okay, read.
Verse 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew.
But it doesn't matter. The more you afflict us, we still had children. We still multiplied. You couldn't stop us. And then what they say.
And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Verse 13. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor.
I need you to get to the point where it says, get them out of the land. Read it. I think it's back there.
Chapter 1, verse 10.
Read.
Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and it come to pass, that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
So get them up out of the land. What is that showing you? That we had rulership in Upper Egypt. We were controlling things. So they needed a pretext to move us into a different area. So their plan was to take us out of rulership position. So they came up with a project so that they can move us over into another area altogether. Why did it say get them up out of the land? We were the people ruling from Upper Egypt. These are the same people in history called the Hyksos, shepherd kings. Now, for those who are not familiar with the Hyksos, let me give you an overview. The Hyksos is some people they claim that came in, I think during what, the 13th dynasty. They came in and they came into Egypt, did a war, took down the Egyptians, and ruled from Upper Egypt for a time. And then they left out of Egypt, disappeared, Asiatics, and no one knows where they are today. That's the history they'll give you if in your institutions. Well, we know about the Hyksos. That time in history, we're still researching that. Well, why are you researching it? Well, we still don't know who they are. They were some shepherd kings, and I think they came out, the Asiatics, they came in and ruled, and then they disappeared. No, could it be these people came in from the famine? Could it be they came in from the famine that happened during that time? And with their children, and their brother had a position there in Egypt and set up his people to become rulers, and that their God led them out of Egypt, those shepherd kings? Could that be the story? No, that can't be the story, because then you would believe in the Bible. You would know that you are the people that made Egypt so great. Think about it. Why is the Great Pyramid on your dollar bill, brothers and sisters? They was going to build a new world construct with the same people who made Egypt great. Think. But they can't tell you you're Israel. That's part of their oath. We got to cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. Psalms 83. So they can't tell you you're Israel, but they need to use their political structure as a pretext to move you in a position to be utilized and build their societies like we build Egypt. And use our mental capacity and use our ingenuity and we have a lot of ingenuity and knowledge. So they needed that to build their new global Egyptian New World Order. Now, the label Hyksos or shepherd kings was placed upon the Israelites that dwelled in the land of Egypt. Why? Because it tells you in scriptures that to be a shepherd was an abomination to the Egyptians. So they named us shepherd kings, and they put us in an area separate from them so that we can deal with that separate. They didn't want to see none of that. All right? Now, this phrase, shepherd kings, came into existence during the 3rd century, during the time of the Greeks, and them hiring an African or an Egyptian historian named Manetho. Now think about this. If you get an Egyptian who have a problem with the children of Israel destroying their lands and their gods and their kings and their armies, is this the guy that will give you a non-biased spin on history? But that's who the Greeks hired. And that's who Josephus is tearing down in these writings, in Josephus against Apion. Josephus against Apion is a book in which Josephus is refuting the credibility of all the Greeks and Egyptian writers. He says Manetho is a liar. He know it was us. Why is he telling you shepherd kings? Who were these shepherd kings? Why are you lying, Manethos? Right? So let's go into it real quick. Let's talk about it. So we're going back to the Josephus. Real quick here. Josephus against Apion, book 1, 14, and I'm on page 6 of the writings. Now, read it real quick. Apion.
It says, Apion was an Alexandrian schoolmaster who lived on the 1st century AD.
Excuse me, the 1st century. Go ahead.
He was responsible for taking Manetho's false account of the Hyksos and expounding on it in order to further hide the fact that the Israelites were in Egypt.
Now, Apion was an Alexandrian schoolmaster who lived during the 1st century AD. He was responsible for taking Manetho's falsified accounts of the Hyksos, which is really our people, and expounding on it in order to further hide the fact that the Israelites were in Egypt. Now, why were they trying to hide the fact that we were in Egypt? Let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. If we found out that we are the people who made Egypt great, that our God crushed Pharaoh and his armies and set us up as a people until we sinned against our God, who eventually put us in the hands of these other nations. If we can piece this together as a people, the answer is before us. How to come back as a people. Let's get back with that God who destroyed the Egyptians and see how that worked out. Let's get back to our book in which this history is written. You see that? So this lie didn't start with the slave ships in our schools today. I'm reading this thing right here, Josephus against Apion, and Apion in the 1st century, continuing the lies of Josephus. If we were there, we would be making these same arguments as Josephus. We'll be making the same arguments. So to let you know that the lies are not just with Caucasians or Europeans. Okay? The lie is with the Egyptians too. And if you go into Egypt today, you'll be hard pressed to find a true Egyptian. Now they're being overran by Ishmael. The majority of Egyptians had to go into Sudan. Right? Let's read about it.
It says, I shall begin. With writings of the Egyptians.
You good?
Mhm.
Okay.
Not indeed of those that have written in Egyptian language, which it is impossible for me to do. But Manetho was a man who was by birth an Egyptian. Yet had he made himself master of the Greek learning, as it is very evident. For he wrote the history of his own country in the Greek tongue by translating it, as he saith himself.
So he put his history, his lies, into the Greek tongue so that he can continue the lies and spread lies on the children of Israel throughout not only Africa, but through Greece also, because they were in league together to hide the truth from us. Read.
Out of their sacred records, he also finds great fault with Herodotus for his ignorance and false relations of the Egyptian affairs. Now this Manetho, in the second book of his Egyptian history, writes concerning us in the following manner. I will set down his very words as if I were to bring the very man himself into a court for a witness. There was a king of ours, whose name was Timaeus. Under him it came to pass, I know not there came, after a surprising manner, men of ignoble birth out of the eastern parts, and had boldness enough to make an expedition into our country, and with ease subdued it by force, yet without hazarding a battle with them.
So he says a king named Timaeus, this is what Manetho says, a king named Manethius, Timaeus came into Egypt and with ease took over the whole country. No pushback. Now mind you, Egypt at this time is the top military force on earth. So this lying Egyptian named Manetho is making up a story of someone coming into the land and subdued it by force. Read.
So when they had gotten those that governed us under their power, they afterwards burnt down our cities and demolished the temples of the gods, and used all the inhabitants after the most barbarous manner. Nay, some they slew, and led their children and their wives into slavery.
So he said these people came into Egypt and started burning our idols and enslaving and killing our women and children. Lies. That sounds like an Iraq setup. When they got the girls saying that, oh, they throwing babies in the incubators. This is what Manetho was saying in his past, lying. Now, when we came into Egypt, there was we weren't killing people. People weren't being enslaved. We didn't destroy their idols. None of that. Manetho's lying. And then, on the other hand, if it is us, then people are going to look at us as some type of evil infiltrators who came into their country to kill and destroy them. But no. Remember, the priest of On had to give up his daughter to Joseph. So what was going on is Joseph was telling all these idolaters around him, listen, you can't be worshiping those gods and those idols around us. And Joseph told them to take all the idols down that was in the temples that was around him. That's what really happened. But this liar right here, this brother right here is lying. Manetho said, well, they came in and they killed our women and children and they started destroying our idols. Nah. Joseph ordered them to take the idols down. Right? And when I read this story years ago, I'm like, man, this is how they do it. There's a saying about, it says the pen is mightier than the sword. That's a saying, it's an old saying. But listen, it don't have to be the truth. If they can write it, and one day, because of history and time gone by, that it's looked at as truth, that's how powerful the pen can be. This dude is straight lying, but now, and here's the key. If Manetho didn't write this, there will be no such thing in this world, especially in America, as Egyptology. It's Manetho's writings they draw from based on the fact that this is written in antiquity, upheld in certain colleges. They use this to lie and claim that Israel never lived in Egypt. Finish reading.
At length, they made one of themselves king, whose name was Salatus. He also lived at Memphis, and made both the upper and lower regions pay tribute, and left garrisons in places that were the most proper for them. He chiefly aimed to secure the eastern parts, as foreseeing that the Assyrians, who had the greatest power, would be desirous of that kingdom, and invade them. And the Sate Nomos, Sethroid, a very proper for this purpose, and which lay upon the Bubastic Canal, but with regard to a certain theologic notion was called Avaris. This he rebuilt and made very strong by the walls he built about it, and by a most numerous garrison of 240,000 armed men, whom he put into it to keep it. Thither Salatus came in summertime, partly to gather his corn and pay his soldiers their wages, and partly to exercise his armed men and thereby to terrify foreigners. When this man had reigned 13 years, after him reigned another, whose name was Beyond. For 40 years, after him reigned another called Apoknos. 36 years.
Now imagine this. Check this out. I want y'all to look at this. Menethos is claiming that some foreigners came into the land, did all these things, and ruled in a foreign country, and had all these dynasties within the country, and not once did the Egyptians go against these people after they came in and killed all their people. The example I can give you, if me and about 70 of my guys and a few other people, just say 100, 200 people, walk into China right now, all right, and we take an army and start killing people and doing all these things and set up ourselves as kings in China. And the memory of what I've done to these people are still there. And I'm able to have dynasty after dynasty living in their country. And yet we're the minority. I mean, that don't even sound right. Especially if you're speaking of the greatest civilization at that time. How could this be? And this is what Josephus is going to ask. How could some people just come into the greatest civilization at that time and set up themselves with no pushback? You are lying, Menethos. Read.
After him, Apophis. After him, Apophis reigned 61 years, and then Jannes 50 years and 1 month.
Go ahead.
After all these reigned Asis 49 years and 2 months. And these 6 were the first rulers among them, who were all along making war with the Egyptians.
And all along they were set up making war with the Egyptians. Lying. Read.
And were very desirous gradually to destroy them to the very roots. This whole nation was styled Hyksos.
And this is what Menethos says with his own words. The whole nation was styled Hyksos. Now that's an issue because there's no nation in the earth. Neither were there a nation back then called Hyksos. So why did he term the word styled Hyksos? Why? Because Hyksos is more so a cultural character. They were shepherd and kings. He could have very well said, well, these people that came into our land were shepherds and kings. Use that term because that relates to Jacob, who got all that sheep and flock from Laban, who were shepherds, who eventually became kings in Egypt, not because we took and destroyed Egypt, because we saved them from a famine, and the king set up Joseph as ruler. See? This history is so important, brothers and sisters, for you to understand. And without this knowledge of the Bible, there's no way you'll be able to go into this history and break it down and pick out the lies. And you notice in all these institutions now, they're like, well, you can't really deal with the Bible. The Bible is, been tampered with. It's no more, as many translations. Just put that down. No. The Bible is the key to break down the lies that was written against us in past history. Because regardless of what you say about the Bible has historical content. It's a history book. It's a history book, and you can go back in time and know what was going on in any period according to the Bible. So now with the Bible, I can break down this guy's lie right here. If we were in Greece during this time, or in Rome during this time in which Joseph is making this argument, we would have posed the same argument. You know you're lying. There's no people named Hyksos. Right? It says, this whole nation was styled Hyksos. Read.
That is shepherd kings.
That is shepherd kings. Go ahead.
For the first syllable hic, according to the sacred dialect, denotes a king, as is sos, a shepherd. But this according to the ordinary dialect, and of these is compounded Hyksos. But some say that these people were Arabians.
But some say they are were Arabians. Now, you notice how it says some say these people are Arabians? Mm-hmm. The same way if you talk about Christ today or the Hebrews today. They'd be like, well, aren't they Middle Eastern? Weren't they Arabs? You notice that? They do the same thing just to knock you off the beaten path. Okay, read.
And also, if I could mention this, this also shows how much of a liar he is, because he just mentions that nobody knows who these particular people are, but then he throws in the idea that they are Arabians. Now the question is, are they Arabians or are they?
Or you don't know who they are.
Right, exactly.
So what Josephus is doing here? Josephus is showing that there's contradictions in all of Manetho's writings. So if there's one contradiction, you can throw it out. That's why he says, I'm going to put this out as evidence, as if we are in court. It's not a credible historical document. That's what he's saying. Manetho was writing against our people based on his disdain against us. So his material is biased and it's not credible. This is what is Josephus is showing here. It's biased and it's not credible. Finish reading on that because there's some keys in this point. We're on page 7. Go ahead.
It says, now in another copy, it is said that this word does not denote kings, but on the contrary denotes captive shepherds. And on this account of the particle hic, for that hic with the aspiration and probable opinion, and more agreeable to ancient history. But Manetho goes on. These people whom we have before named kings, and called shepherds also, and their descendants, as he says, kept possession of Egypt 511 years. After these, he says that the kings of Thebais and the other parts of Egypt made an insurrection against the shepherds, and that there a terrible and long war was made between them. He says further that under a king whose name was Alis Phragmuthosis, the shepherds by him, and were indeed driven out of parts of Egypt, but were shut up in a place and contained 10,000 acres. This place was named Avaris. Manetho says, that the shepherds built a wall round all this place, which was a large and a strong wall, and this in order to keep all the possessions and their prey within a place of strength. But that Thumosis, the son of Alisphramuthos, made an attempt to take them by force and by siege, and 480,000 men to lie rotund about them. But that upon his despair of taking the place by that siege, they came to a position with them that they should leave Egypt and go without any harm to be done to them. whithersoever ever they would, and that after this composition was made, they went away with their whole families and effects, not fewer in number than 240,000, and took their journey from Egypt through the wilderness for Syria. But that as they were in fear of the Assyrians, who had then the dominion over Asia, they built a city in the country which is now called Judea.
So hold it right now. So this is Manetho's words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Manetho is saying that eventually, after these people did all this bad stuff to us, we let them go free without harm into the wilderness. And because the Syrians controlled parts of Asia, these people eventually went into Judea. Now, even back at this time in history, we all know what people, even in the 1st century, 3rd century, or whatever it may be, we know and they know the people who went into Judea. Why didn't Manetho mention Israel one time in this document?
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned the exact route that it took us to leave Egypt, go into the wilderness, and walk into the land of Canaan. But instead of saying these were the children of Israel, he made a record to say that they were Hyksos. Why? Not to deceive the people who were back then. That history was being written so that when we read it thousands of years later, we will believe that this historian is credible. He was writing the lies for us now, so that we could know in the time of our captivity that in fact our people are the children of Israel. See, you couldn't pull this over on Josephus because at this time we were still in Israel. We knew. So Satan had his historians set up at that time for the deception that would eventually happen to Israel once we're scattered throughout the four corners of the earth and lose our identity in history. That's what they was pinning this history for. He was using Manetho and the Greeks to set up a record to deceive us down the line. And I'm saying this because the Greeks are not the people that's bringing this history no more. It's our people in our neighborhoods, these Egyptologists, that are using Manetho's records against us. Man, I thank the Most High that we got this history, because I remember being on the street. It was around 1998. Man, some of these records, I wish I still had. Some of these things are on VHS tapes, old tapes, but I don't know where they are now. But I was speaking to this historian on the street, and he was going on about saying, well, there's still some questions whether or not Israel really existed as a nation when it comes to the writings of ancient history. And I say, what writings? You talking about the writings of Manetho? And then he's like, well, yeah, Manetho. I'm like, Manetho is the key writer, the Egyptian historian. I mean, right? He said, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's talk about Manetho. Manetho won't mention Israel, but he would mention the shepherd kings, right? And the guy was like, well, you should see the look on his face. I'm like, so who's the shepherd kings? And the guy came back and said, well, no one knows who really they are. Oh, you don't know who they are. So are you telling me they can't be Israel? You should have seen this guy's face. Like, where do y'all get this stuff? We read, people. They expect us. They usually deal with us from the platform of ignorance. That's where they usually we get into a conversation with people. This is how they look at us. They always deal with a conversation with us from a stance that we're here and they are here. We're down here and they're up here. That's their conversation with us. But when you have a normal conversation and you're on equal footing, now we can talk. Excuse me, sir, let me agree with you that, all right, Manetho said, all right, let's talk about the Hyksos for a second. Who is the Hyksos? Because Manetho mentioned him, right? And then the guy was like, yeah. Well, you know, they're still trying to figure that out. I'm like, exactly. So are you telling me they can't? Hold up. You don't know who they are, but they can't be the children of Israel. I'm like, all of you are lying. You all know we are the people that walk through the Red Sea. But if you acknowledge that, then you have to come around and admit that the Bible is the most exact record compared to any other book on earth right now. You would have to admit that the Bible is valid. Right? And here's another question. The Jewish people, why aren't they trying to discredit Manetho's writings? If they're the Hebrews and they're the Jews and they claim their people walked through the Red Sea, why are they allowing Manetho's writings to be taught in their institutions? Now check that out. That's kind of deep. Here it is, you talking about me and my people, claiming we never existed, and I'm going to allow your writings into my institution? No, they're the Greeks. They were in league with Manetho. Okay? There's more. Go ahead.
They built a city in that country which is now called Judea, and that large enough to contain this great number of men, and called it Jerusalem.
So Manethos even admitted that they called it Jerusalem. So who's these people? Are they the Hyksos? You see how they'll mention everything but omit the Most High's people's name. They can be Asiatics, or every time I look at these history channels too, I used to get mad because I'm a history buff, brother. And if I'm looking at CNN or something and a commercial comes on and say, you know, who was these ancient records revealed on the History Channel? Could it be that these people who walked through the Red Sea, that this happened or that happened, come and find out the mysteries of the Bible? When I hear something like that, we didn't have TiVo and those things you could record. Even if I had to call out work, I would need to see what they're dropping, just to see what I would call out work just to be there to see this. And I'm like, man, they gotta be revealing something. I want to see what they're revealing based on prophecy or whatever, or what they're hiding. And every show they have is to actually, believe it or not, give ability to their lies, and to leave more questions in an area in which we need answers. Because listen, if I'm looking at a television show talk about mysteries and all that, why is it all the experts are asking questions? All the experts are on there saying, well, it could have been, or it might have been this, or some say it was the Asiatics, but others might say they were Chinese and Hamitic. I'm like, man, I'll be ready to throw something at the TV, man. I'm like, you people are lying. So it still comes back to Psalms 83. Let us cut them off from being a nation, so the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. One moment, I think the camera went out a little bit, right? One moment. Okay, we're back, good. Go ahead.
Now Manetho in another book of his says that this nation thus called shepherds were also called captives in their sacred books. And this account of his is the truth. For
he says, now listen to this clearly. Now Manetho in another book says, now he's using two separate records. Manetho told the truth in one book and lied in the other. Now, Manetho, in another book of his, says that this nation, thus called shepherds, were also called captives, which we were, like the Bible says, in their sacred book. So he's telling us that these particular people had a sacred book. Yes, it's called the Bible, or the Book of the Covenant, which was the Old Testament at that time. All right. Now, it says, and this account of his is truth, says Josephus. For feeding of sheep was the employment of our forefathers in the most ancient ages. And as they led such a wandering life in feeding sheep, they were called shepherds. Nor was it without reason that they were also called captives by the Egyptians, since one of our ancestors, Joseph, told the king of Egypt that he was a captive, and afterward sent for his brethren into Egypt by the king's permission. But as for these matters, I shall make a more exact inquiry about them elsewhere. So Manetho has a complete argument in the Josephus against Apion, how the Greeks and the Egyptians conspired to teach false history and omit our history out of the Canaans of Egypt. And then once we fell, knowing that Christ went into Egypt, Joseph went into Egypt, Mary went into Egypt to hide for a time when a child was born, that we had communities in Egypt. So eventually our people today would have linked ourselves back to the Hebrews in Christ and to Egypt. So what did they do? No sooner as we fell during the 6th century under the Arab uprising of Islam during the 7th century, 8th century, they started flooding the land of Egypt with Arabs. Started flooding all conquest, taking down the Middle East and taking down our homeland and different areas of that nature. The same way, don't forget it's Ishmael and Edom, the same way the Romans were doing us in other areas. Taking down countries like the North American Indians, setting up churches. Now they're taking down landmarks in Egypt, setting up mosques. And so I'm standing today and I find out that I'm a Hebrew and say, well, weren't the people in Egypt black? They'll be like, well, listen, I'm looking over in Egypt now and they know but Arabs to me. Christ was an Arab. Moses must have been an Arab. Look over there today. It's a conspiracy. Right? It's a conspiracy. They flooded those lands with Arabs to make you think that all the people over there are alike. Okay, then you ask, well, what about the Nubian Egyptians? What's going on with them? They're being oppressed too. Why? They're suffering for what they did to us. And you speak to the Nubians, and they love our people though, I'll tell you that. But you speak to the Nubians, and if you speak to the Arabs, they'll be like, yeah, y'all bunny, y'all bunny Yukub. We're who? You're Bani Yukub. Oh, we're the sons of Jacob. That's what Bani Yukub is, right? Ban, son, Jacob, Jacob. So they all know us in the Middle East as the sons of Jacob. And here's the shame part of it. All these years, when you speak to them in their languages, they have known who we were the whole time. The whole time, they'll tell you you're Bani Jacob. You're the sons of Jacob. So your historians are teaching you this in your colleges about the Hyksos period and Manetho's history, claiming that some Asiatics came into Egypt. But yet the people in the Middle East and the people in Egypt are telling us that we're the sons of Jacob. The sad part of this, brothers and sisters, even if our people knew at this point, I don't think they would care. That's the sad part. Now, there's more to this, but I'm going to let y'all all read that on your own time, because he rips Manetho up on every point he made against our people. It's too much to go into in one lesson. But you have the history yourself. The passages, everything you need to destroy that argument that's given by the Egyptologists and those that are dealing with the what they call that, the black, the Afrocentric religion in itself. I can't stand the Afrocentric religions. I'm gonna tell you straight up, because it's a total diversion, and it makes people close-minded. I can't base my beliefs, my teachings, and what the Most High gave us off of just black people. Because it's like a horse with covers over his face. He can only see forward. He can't see past those blinders. So we're not operating like that. You know, we got people now saying, well, listen, the only way I'm going to deal with the 12 tribes of Israel if all the 12 tribes are black people. I'm like, listen, I'm open for that. Show me how the 12 tribes are black people, when I have research showing you who they are. We know who the tribe of Dan is. We know who all these different tribes are. And guess what? Dan looks like the Indian tribes. Dan looked kind of like Naphtali today. So these people all these people don't have black features. But they're the 12 tribes of Israel nonetheless. Now, let's get a few more things I wanted to hit. Before we go, destroying this African deception that's out there. One moment. Okay, I'm gonna skip directly. I'm going directly to page. This is all. Let me go down here. I'm going to page 11 in the document. Let's skip over to Manethos. Y'all can read that in your own time. I want to see. I want to read something from the Babylonian Talmud. Still breaking down the African deception. 108 and B of the Babylonian Talmud. Now, let alone the Talmud, for those who don't know, is the record and the ritualistic book of the Jewish people today. They do not follow the Torah. They do not follow the 5 books of Moses. They do not follow the New Testament or the Old Testament. That's a cover. The book they follow is the Babylonian Talmud. I had a rabbi myself admit that the Talmud they followed, the Talmud that they read from, is not even from Israel. It's from Babylon. I have that on record where a rabbi on the radio show admitted that the Talmud is Babylonian. So my question is, if you are in Hebrew in Israel or whoever you claim it to be, why are you following the Talmud when they have nothing to do with our record? They're sorcerers. But let's hit this. It says Babylonian Talmud 108b. It says our rabbis taught what?
Our rabbis taught 3 copulated in the ark.
This is in the Talmud, and I hope, brothers and sisters, keep this for yourself and make sure you mention this to your Jewish people when you talk to your Jewish friends. It's in your Talmud. 3 copulated in the ark. Read.
And they were all punished. The dog.
The dog is punished above all animals.
The raven.
The raven.
And Ham.
and Ham, which is the father of the predominantly dark races or the North Africans. Read.
The dog was doomed to be tied. The raven expectorates, and Ham was smitten in his skin.
So in your Babylonian Talmud, it teaches you that to be black is a curse. To be someone of a darker hue is a curse. Right? Now, the footnote for this particular passage in that same book states the following. Read this.
An example. From him descended Cush, the Negro, who was black-skinned.
That's in their Talmud. From him descended Cush, which is Ethiopians. The Negro who is black-skinned. So this is what they're teaching their children in the Talmud. Now, of course, we're not from Cush. We're from Shem. But the scriptures let us know that the Most High will gather many of our people out of Ethiopia. We during the time after we was fleeing Jerusalem in 70 AD, we went into Ethiopia. So they are a dispersed of Ethiopia. Let's get that in Zephaniah, 2nd chapter. And let me get it here. Was it Zechariah?
3 and 10.
Is it 10th verse?
3 and 10.
3 and 10, read it.
It says,
we're in Zephaniah 3 and 10, read.
Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10.
Go ahead.
From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia.
From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia.
My suppliants, even the daughter of my people, the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring my offering.
The daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering, showing you that we're not Ethiopians, but we were dispersed. And we were dispersed in parts of Ethiopia. So when you look at the land of Cush, even though we're not Cushites, a lot of our people live in the land of Cush. So if you're from Ethiopia, the Babylonian Talmud, under what the Jewish people follow today, will automatically look at you as a cursed people. Not cursed according to the curses the Most High put us under in Deuteronomy 28. But they're teaching in their institutions that being dark or having color is a curse. And this train of thought is established in their religious and their educational institutions. All right. Let's go to Genesis 9 and 25. Thank you. Genesis 9 and 25. And this is what they're using. This is what the Jewish Talmudists are using, the Kabbalists are using, and they have set up your Christian church. Okay? The Christian church is Jewish too. Let's make that clear. The Roman Catholic Church, with the Pope and all that, follow the same guys. They follow the Talmud, they follow Satan, they're Kabbalists. You look at your cardinals, you look at your Pope, they all have those little yarmulkes on their head. It's the same religion. Read Genesis 9 and 25.
Genesis chapter 9 verse 25. And he said, Cursed be Canaan.
Cursed be Canaan.
A servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And the Most High shall enlarge Japheth, and shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant.
Now I need you to hold that for 1 second, right? And let's examine this. Go back to your Bible dictionary again and get Ham. Let's go there again and read Ham.
Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races.
Ham became the father of the dark races.
Not the Negroes.
Not the Negroes. So that proved right there that even Zondervan know that the Negroes are not under Ham's lineages. Read.
He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes.
But who?
But the Egyptians.
Africans.
Ethiopians.
Hamites, North Africans.
Libyans.
Now you notice it says Ethiopians, Libyans, and who else?
And Canaanites.
So how can they say that the Ethiopians are the cursed ones when the curse came on who? Canaan. Cush is the Ethiopians. That's a different family of Ham. You see how, now do you see why history is so important, brothers and sisters? You can rip them apart with their ideologies. So you're claiming in your Talmud in a footnote, from him descended Cush, who was black-skinned. Now, they're doing something else here. They're making people believe that only Cush is the black-skinned one right here. When Canaan originally was dark-skinned, Ethiopians, Libyans, Egyptians, they were all dark-skinned. Right? Now there's more. Let's go to Genesis 9 and 25 again.
Genesis chapter 9, verse 25. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren.
A servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren.
And he said, Blessed be the most high power of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. The Most High shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tent of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant.
And Canaan shall be his servant. So I'm pulling this out, brothers and sisters, because Christianity, the whole philosophy of black people going into captivity and are Gentiles, come from this passage. This is what they use to say that this is black people who went into slavery. And slave masters on plantations use this scripture so that good slaves can know that, listen, this is your part. God put you in this condition, serve us, and you'll die and go to heaven. This is what they were teaching on plantations, that we were from this cursed seed of Ham, and that our captivity and us serving other people in Americas and different parts of the world was due to this particular verse. Here's my question. See, I used to sit down with pastors, go in there with a suit sometimes, in the 90s, and I would just sit and talk with them because, sometimes I wanted to exchange understanding. And I would say, well, who are we according to the Bible? He was like, well, it doesn't matter, son, but, we are dealing with the curse of Ham. I'm like, interested. So, and then eventually I get put out when they realize I understand what's going on. But before that happens, I pose certain questions. Why is it you know about this curse of Canaan, and you've never mentioned in your churches the curse of the children of Israel who would go into the slave ships in Deuteronomy 28? How is it that you know immediately that you are from the cursed seeds of Canaan and ignore the curses that came on the children of Israel? That's food for thought. This is what they promote in their institutions. Why? Because it places us in a different family lineage altogether. That's what they want. They want us in the wilderness searching for an identity. And they're willing to put us in an entirely different race to do so. Now, in the grand scheme of things, people will say, well, does that matter? Yes, that matters. Because how can I understand prophecy concerning the people in the Bible if we don't know who the people are? If there's prophecy concerning these particular people in the last days, how do I know if the book is correct if we're pertaining prophecies to a people who are not the people? But here's some more tidbits for you, which is in the document. And when a lawyer compiled a lot of these, I thank the Most High for this. When I read some of these things, man, brothers and sisters, I almost fell out of my chair reading some of the stuff that they taught in early Christianity. There's no way a Christian can continue to be a Christian if you were to go into the minds of the architects of this particular religion. There's no way a Christian could follow Christianity if they knew the mindset of those who constructed modern Christianity. It would be impossible. It was widely taught in Christianity in the 18th and 19th century that the reason as to why the so-called Negroes of North America and the West Indies and Haiti suffered slavery is because they were from the cursed seed of Ham. Still being taught in church today. Anne Catherine Emmerich. Remember that name. When you get an opportunity, it's in your document. Google her. Anne Catherine Emmerich. She's also of Khazar line. A Roman Catholic, listen, mystic nun during the late 18th, the late 18th and early 19th century. Now, they call her a Roman Catholic mystic nun. We call her a witch. Okay? The scriptures cut through the chase, all right? This witch said this, all right? She have her writings which are widely respected by Roman Catholics even till this day. Christians have her writings in their library and have no idea what she's really about. She had some writings, highly respected writings called The Life of Our Lord Jesus Christ. She alleged that these writings were from visions revealed to her at the age of 6. Okay? Now, as far as I'm concerned, you can take that 6 and put 2 more 6s right next to it, based on some of the information that spewed from this woman's demented psyche. Listen to the information that was given to this girl at the age of 6, which is probably one of Satan's children. And it was revealed to her information concerning the children of the god, the giants. Here's some of her excerpts. Read that.
It says, but God replied that it would not be so, that whoever should kill Cain, he placed a sign upon him, that whoever should kill Cain, he placed a sign upon him, that no myself be punished sevenfold. Cain's posterity gradually became colored.
Hold up. Here's the mark. The mark of Cain, the killer, the murderer. What happened?
Cain's posterity gradually became colored.
Cain's posterity gradually became colored. So he was white, and now he's being colored. And I never like that term when people say, well, we're colored people. When I think of colored, I think of a canvas of white being colored in like a coloring book. It says here, Cain's posterity gradually became colored. So that was his mark, according to this woman's visions. Now, that's not the scary part. The scary part is she's recognized as an authority in the Roman Catholic Church and in all Catholic theology. That's what's scary. Who's recognizing this? The people who set up your churches, your theologian schools, and teaching the people in the ghetto, yes, that they're from the cursed seeds of Ham. This is what they believe. They believe that Cain, posterity, gradually became colored. Read.
Ham's also were browner than those of Shem.
And Ham's children were also browner than those of Shem. Now, what is that saying? What is that saying psychologically there? That automatically dark is bad. Dark. The darker you are, the worse you are. Listen.
The nobler races were distinguished by a particular mark, always of a lighter color.
In her writings that she claimed God revealed to her at the age of 6, nobler races were distinguished by a particular mark, always a lighter color. Read.
They who were engendered children of the same stamp, and as corruption increased, the mark also increased until at the last it covered the whole body, and people became darker and darker.
And people became darker and darker. Go ahead.
But yet in the beginning, there were no people perfectly black.
But in the beginning, there was no people perfectly black.
They became so only by degrees.
They became so only by degrees. Now that sound, you know what I mean? That sound knowledgeable. That sounds like someone with some level of insight. Don't you know they was referencing this woman for this information? They was like, oh man, God really have talked to this woman. That's the reason we're over blacks, right? This is what was used in the 18th and 19th century to shape Christianity. There's more. She have another writing here. And the same, this is book 116, Noah and his prosperity, Horn and the Semshit leaders of the people. What did she see?
I saw the cursing of Ham.
So those, hold on, one moment here. One moment. Let me